Agatha Raisin and the Snooty Sugar Secret. A village slight turns deadly when sugar, pride, and secrets curdle in Carsley, and Agatha Raisin finds herself drawn into a murder far stickier than icing. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Agatha Raisin declared, "If this goes wrong, I'm emigrating." It was her preferred way of beginning any event she had personally organised, a mixture of threat, pride, and the faint hope that someone would beg her not to worry. No one did. The WI hall hummed with chatter, cake forks, and the rustle of overstarched tablecloths, and Agatha stood at the centre like a general surveying a battlefield of sponge layers and iced buns. Her evening, her modern sugar and baking showcase, should have secured her village prestige for months. She had hired Serena Dalrymple, an ex-London sugar visionary with a glossy brochure and a frightfully smug boutique in Mercester called Snooty Sugar. The woman had appeared in magazines. She had opinions. She was, in short, the sort of person Agatha felt duty-bound to impress and simultaneously despise. Serena swept into the hall 10 minutes late, which was, of course, the London way. Tall, thin, upholstered in expensive black, and wearing an expression suggesting Carsley should apologise for existing, she drifted past the tables as though allergic to sponge cake. "How quaint," she murmured. It was unclear whether she meant the decor or the villagers. Agatha's eclairs, bought at great inconvenience and at a price she preferred not to recall, sat proudly on a silver tray. She nudged them forward. "A little something to welcome you," she said, hoping her tone conveyed effortless sophistication rather than raw desperation. Serena picked one up between two fingers, sniffed it, took a delicate bite, then tapped Agatha's waistline with the sugar spoon. Some people really shouldn't be left alone with sugar at our age. The hall rippled with delighted titters. Mrs. Mason choked on a fairy cake. Someone actually applauded. Agatha's smile froze, brittle as spun sugar. She had endured insults, slights, and one unfortunate incident involving a collapsing trestle table, but never had she been publicly weighed and measured by a woman who resembled an expensive hat stand. Bill Wong, dragged along by his mother, stood near the doorway, looking like he wished to melt into the radiator. He caught Agatha's eye and offered an expression of helpless sympathy. It didn't help. Sympathy rarely did. Serena launched into her lecture, the WI hall echoing her bright, patronising patter. "Clean sugar," she announced, "is the future, not like the heavy-handed, old-fashioned blends you find in rural areas." Her gaze swept over the assembled villagers as if expecting them to apologise for being alive. "Londoners are ahead of the curve, of course." "Even Hodge has better manners," Agatha muttered. Hodge, had he been present, would have agreed and possibly bitten Serena's ankle. Mrs. Bloxby, ever the peacemaker, raised a gentle hand. "Miss Dalrymple, perhaps you could explain why your blends are so special. It would be helpful for our members." But Serena waved her off with a bored flutter. "Oh, darling, it's all terribly scientific. The important thing is exclusivity. Not everyone understands it." Two WI members immediately quarrelled over who had been promised a free sample packet of Slimmix. Their raised voices, accusing fingers, and the dramatic flinging of a tea towel created an unintended sideshow that Serena seemed to find charming. Agatha did not. It merely confirmed her belief that villagers were incapable of behaving with grace in front of important guests. During the tasting break, Agatha slipped toward the corridor to recover her dignity. She hadn't intended to overhear anything, but Serena's voice carried, sharp and hissed, unmistakably London when stressed. "I told you there'll be no more threats. My backers expect results. If you don't stop, I'll go public." A second voice, lower and tense, replied, "Careful, Serena. You're not as untouchable as you think." Agatha froze. A proper London-style confrontation right outside her WI event? It was almost worth the humiliation. Almost. Serena reappeared moments later, expression smoothed, smile lacquered into something brittle. She resumed her lecture, but Agatha watched closely now. The woman's hands shook slightly, and her eyes darted toward the corridor. A useful clue, perhaps, and certainly a delicious one. The evening ended with restrained applause, the sort given to someone admired but disliked. Serena accepted it as her due. Agatha accepted it as a personal failure. The villagers accepted it as prime gossip. Outside, Agatha stalked toward her cottage with the dignity of a queen freshly dethroned. Her heels clicked furiously on the pavement. She replayed Serena's insult again and again, each repetition adding a new shade of outrage. Bill caught up to her halfway down the lane. "Agatha, don't let her get to you. She's a type." "You mean a sanctimonious, stick-thin, London-bred snob?" "I wasn't going to put it quite like that." Agatha sniffed. "We can't all be diplomatic policemen, Bill." He smiled, then sobered. "I did see her talking heatedly with someone earlier. Bit odd, really." Red herring delivered neatly, Agatha thought, though she wouldn't have phrased it like that. Instead, she said, "Probably negotiating a discount on insults." By the time she reached home, she had declared 3 times that Serena Dalrymple would regret crossing Agatha Raisin. She meant it too. One could tolerate many things in Castle: nosy neighbours, tepid WIT, Doris Simpson forgetting to dust the mantelpiece, but public humiliation by a woman called Snooty Sugar was beyond endurance. Agatha dropped her handbag on the table and kicked off her shoes with a dramatic sigh. Hodge, appearing from behind an armchair, greeted her with a cool stare that suggested he would have handled the WI evening with more dignity. "Don't look at me like that," she told him. "You try being fat-shamed by a sugar stick." Hodge flicked his tail in what she interpreted as agreement. She poured herself a small glass of wine, not a ritual, she assured herself, but a medicinal necessity, and stood at the window. Lights glowed warmly across the village, and faint laughter drifted from the Red Lion. Agatha felt a surge of determination. Tomorrow she would restore her pride. Tomorrow she would plot something. Tomorrow... The phone rang. She let it ring out. When the ringing stopped, the silence felt louder than it should have. Only Mrs. Bloxby or Trouble called this late, and she wasn't in the mood for either. As she climbed into bed, she replayed Serena's insult one final time. Some people really shouldn't be left alone with sugar at our age. The nerve, the sheer galling nerve. Hodge curled up beside her, warm and unimpressed. His steady purr softened the sting of the evening. Agatha stroked his head, muttering, "Don't worry, darling. Tomorrow I'll show her." It was a comforting promise, until morning came, and Agatha discovered that Serena Dalrymple hadn't finished haunting her at all. And suddenly Agatha Raisin's determination looked far less triumphant and far more incriminating. Hodge stretched, yawned, and settled deeper against her, blissfully unaware that life in Castle was about to turn considerably more complicated. Agatha began the next morning with a declaration that would have shaken weaker households. "I refuse to mope," she announced to the toaster, which had done nothing to deserve such firmness. "Absolutely refuse." The toaster responded by ejecting her slice of bread with undue enthusiasm, sending it skittering onto the counter. Hodge, who had been lurking with opportunistic interest, pounced on the warm toast as if it were a small, edible burglar. Doris Simpson appeared in the doorway with a dishcloth and the expression of a woman who had learned long ago that Agatha's mornings should never be challenged. "You're up early, Mrs. Raisin. That WI event must have worn you out." "Worn me out? Don't be silly," Agatha said, snatching the toast from Hodge's approving paws. "Last night was a minor blip, a strategic setback, a temporary dip in my public approval rating." She paused. "But only temporary." Doris, who had survived many of Agatha's temporary dips, produced a plate of Dundee cake she had brought just in case breakfast went wrong. Agatha seized a slice, poured herself a strong coffee, and perched at the kitchen table like a general planning a counterattack. "I've decided," she announced, waving the cake as though it were a sceptre. "I will not let Serena Dalrymple's insult be the last word. Castle will host its own Cotswold Sweet Fair, and I, Agatha Raisin, shall preside over it." "Lovely, Mrs. Raisin," Doris said, in the tone one used when a child announced plans to tunnel to France. She bent to pick up a sugar cube Hodge had knocked loose from its bowl. The cat, thinking it a new game, batted the cube under the dresser with a swift paw. Agatha pointed. "Look at that. Even Hodge is sending a message. Sugar belongs to the people, not to snooty boutique tyrants." Doris made a polite sound. "Well, I'm sure the village will like a fair." "The village will adore a fair," Agatha corrected, "and once they see I'm the one behind it, they'll forget last night ever happened. Humiliation swept away, reputation restored, prestige renewed." She ate another determined bite of cake. If pride could be measured in sugar, she was surely at risk of overdosing. By late afternoon, properly dressed in her best-tailored jacket and feeling equal parts righteous and glamorous, Agatha strode to the Red Lion to spread the word. The pub smelled of chips, laughter, and the faint tang of old beer, a comforting, castle perfume. The regulars were gathered in their usual pockets, retirees discussing the price of petrol, young mothers gossiping about school fundraisers, and a knot of villagers who had attended last night's WI spectacle and were already deep in post-event dissection. Agatha lifted her chin and marched to the bar. "John, a lime and soda, please, and make it look sophisticated." The landlord eyed her, unsure how one might elevate lime and soda to sophistication, but handed it over with a flourish. Agatha turned dramatically, ready to seize the narrative. "Well," she announced, loud enough for gossip to obey, "it's clear to me that the Cotswolds is hungry for something more authentic than that." She waved a dismissive hand. "Snooty sugar nonsense." Murmurs. Anticipation. A few villagers even turned their chairs toward her. "Excellent. I intend to host a Cotswold sweet fair," she continued. "A celebration of real cakes, honest sugar, proper baking, and absolutely no London snobbery. Carsley deserves it. I deserve it." Cheers would have been nice. Instead, she received polite interest, which was better than disdain and far better than laughter. Before she could embellish the idea further, her mobile, a sturdy, slightly embarrassing brick, rang. She recognized the number and lifted it with relish. "Charles, darling." Charles Fraith's lazy drawl floated through the speaker. "Caught the WI news in the paper. How's the wounded pride?" "Non-existent," Agatha lied. "In fact, I'm launching a grand sweet fair, but I suppose you wouldn't be interested unless there was good cake." Her tone dripped bait. Charles swallowed it whole. "Cake, you say? Well, perhaps I could support the event, provided you don't poison me with anything diet-related." "Diet cakes are the enemy," Agatha declared. "We only serve proper sugar in Carsley." "Then I'm in," Charles laughed. "Ring me when you need the charm of a title." Agatha snapped the phone shut triumphantly. "There, you see," she told the pub. "Even London society approves." Not everyone was impressed. At a side table, Oliver Hart, Carsley's earnest baker, shook his head. "I don't trust that Serena woman," he muttered to his companion. "All those fancy blends, and now half my customers want Slimmix. Doesn't seem right to me." It was the first hint of village resentment. Agatha filed it away. Perhaps Oliver would be a willing ally. Just then, the pub door swung open, and in hurried Tamsin Rowe, Serena's overworked assistant, mousy, breathless, and permanently apologetic, she wove toward Agatha like a guilty homing pigeon. "Mrs. Raisin, I'm so sorry about last night," she blurted. "Miss Dalrymple sometimes gets carried away." "Carried away?" "She practically declared war on my waistline." Tamsin winced. "She's under a lot of pressure. The business, well, it's stressful. Investors, suppliers, health people. She doesn't always handle it gracefully." A clue, or perhaps a convenient excuse. Either way, Agatha stored it. "And you work yourself to the bone for her," Agatha added, studying Tamsin's tired eyes. "I do my best," Tamsin murmured. "She wants everything perfect, every measurement, every sample." Oliver the baker leaned forward. "Funny thing that. You'd think someone selling imported blends would trust her suppliers." Tamsin stiffened. "Imported? Oh, well, she does, of course. Absolutely." Her lie was obvious enough to be comic. A red herring or a breadcrumb? Agatha couldn't yet tell. Before she could probe further, a flurry of motion caught her eye near the back corner of the pub. Serena herself, sleek, sharp, and radiating barely contained irritation, was locked in a tense conversation with Veronica Pike, the well-groomed vicar's wife from Lower Hinton. Veronica's Sugar Sinners support group was moderately famous in the Cotswolds for turning guilt into a communal activity. Agatha leaned closer, pretending to adjust her scarf. Veronica's face was pale, strained, and very unlike her usual composed smile. Serena looked annoyed. The two whispered fiercely, Veronica gripping her handbag so tightly her knuckles whitened. Moments later, Veronica swept past Agatha, chin high. "Charity order," she said quickly. "Just a misunderstanding." Which meant, of course, that it absolutely wasn't. Agatha felt a delicious ripple of anticipation. She could smell scandal the way Hodge smelled tuna. If Serena was arguing with assistant, baker, and vicar's wife all in one day, the Sugar Queen's empire might be softer at the centre than she claimed. She drained her lime and soda with determination. Right. Tomorrow morning I will visit Serena at her converted mill in Mercester. I'll ask her to sponsor the sweet fare, and if she refuses, Oliver grinned, you'll sweet-talk her. I will do nothing of the sort, Agatha sniffed. I will show her that she cannot swan into Castle, insult our baking, humiliate me, and expect to go unchallenged. She will sponsor the fare, apologize for last night, and ideally lose that ghastly smirk. Tamsin looked alarmed. Please don't upset her too much. She's been under strain. Strain? Agatha repeated. She's the one distributing powdered self-importance at £20 a tin. But Tamsin's worry lingered. Another clue. Something deeply wrong in Serena Dalrymple's glossy kingdom. Later, when the crowds thinned, Agatha marched home fueled by righteous energy. She flicked on her kitchen lights and found Hodge sitting on the table like a judgmental ornament. He eyed her with that feline disdain that suggested he knew precisely how the WI evening had gone. Doris had left a note. Stew in the fridge. Hope tomorrow goes better. Agatha snorted. She had no intention of letting tomorrow go merely better. Tomorrow would begin her triumphant return to village dominance. She pictured herself at the sweet fare with bunting, applause, glowing reviews in the Evesham Echo, and ideally Serena Dalrymple gnashing her teeth in professional envy. She reheated Doris's stew, ignoring how healthy it tasted, and paced the kitchen as she planned her offensive. She would arrive at Serena's mill in a crisp jacket and fearless mood. She would appear magnanimous but firm. She would offer Serena the opportunity to redeem herself publicly by sponsoring Castle's fare, and she would subtly suggest that failing to support a beloved village event could damage Serena's fragile reputation. It's perfect, Agatha told Hodge. Hodge blinked once, unimpressed. Oh, don't act superior, Agatha muttered, spooning stew onto her plate. You weren't the one sugar-shamed in front of the WI. Hodge stretched, yawned, and knocked the rescued sugar cube from earlier onto the floor with a decisive paw. It rolled across the tiles and landed at Agatha's feet like a tiny omen, sweet, simple, and faintly mocking. She washed her plate, straightened the kitchen, and phoned Charles to confirm his vague promise of support. He answered on the second ring. Agatha, darling, I've been thinking, he began. If you're going to take on the Sugar Empress, you'll need moral support, and probably a decent cake supplier. I intend to be formidable tomorrow, she replied. I never doubted it, Charles said. I just doubted your diplomacy. She hung up on him before he could elaborate. Diplomacy was overrated. Determination was far more effective. By the time she climbed into bed, Agatha's mind was buzzing with strategies, phrases, and imagined victories. Somewhere between planning her opening line and rehearsing Serena's forced apology, she drifted into sleep, smiling faintly. Tomorrow would be glorious. A sweet victory, a reclaimed reputation, a moment of triumph. Hodge, curled at her feet, twitched his tail and dozed, blissfully unaware that tomorrow would bring something far darker than village revenge, something Agatha could neither predict nor prevent. For now, though, the cottage rested in amiable quiet. The kettle gave a tiny cooling sigh, Hodge stretched luxuriously, and Agatha, undefeated and dreaming of sugar-fueled glory, slept on, unaware that within 24 hours yesterday's humiliation would turn into something far worse, and Castle would be in uproar once again. Agatha marched out of her cottage with the purposeful stride of a woman preparing to reclaim her dignity. I will not be intimidated by a sugar merchant, she muttered, jabbing the lock shut. Hodge, perched on the windowsill, watched her go with the regal disinterest of a monarch observing a deluded subject. Her plan for the day was simple: confront Serena Dalrymple, secure sponsorship for the sweet fare, and enjoy the private thrill of reversing last night's humiliation. With coffee and Dundee cake fortifying her ego, she drove toward Mercester, practicing phrases like civic responsibility, community goodwill, and public image, each sharpened to a pleasant sting. The converted mill appeared at the bend of the lane, honeystone walls, smug pots of lavender, gravel raked to a pretentious smoothness. A shiny plaque near the door read Snooty Sugar HQ, which Agatha privately translated as House of Insufferable Pretense. Of course it looks perfect, she muttered. People like Serena always live in places that smell of money and self-satisfaction. She rang the bell. Nothing. She rang again, pressing harder, as if moral pressure alone might summon the occupant. Still nothing. "Well, I'm not driving all the way back to Castley because she can't answer a door," Agatha declared. She tested the handle. It clicked open. Honestly, practically an invitation to burglars. She stepped inside. The open-plan kitchen stretched out in glossy efficiency. Marble counters, stainless steel appliances, and a faint smell of vanilla that seemed to hover with deliberate grace. The place reeked of curated lifestyle, the kind normally sold in magazines promising happiness through artisanal condiments. "Serena," Agatha called. "It's Agatha Raisin. We need to talk, preferably about your manners." Silence. She moved forward, irritation swelling, and then she stopped. Serena Dalrymple lay slumped over the center island, her immaculate hair spilling across a bowl of glossy icing. One elegant hand hung limply toward a tall canister labeled Snooty Sugar Slimmix. Exclusive formula. Her posture looked theatrical, as though she had staged a dramatic swoon for effect. But the stillness was wrong, too heavy, too final. Agatha's stomach turned cold. "Serena?" she whispered. She reached out and touched the woman's shoulder. The skin felt cool. The head did not lift. In that instant, the truth jolted through her like a slap. Serena Dalrymple was dead. Agatha screamed, loudly, wholeheartedly, and with none of the restraint she applied to village disagreements. The sharp, piercing sound ricocheted through the kitchen and up the staircase. Footsteps thundered above. Tamsin Rowe appeared on the landing, face drained of colour. "Miss Dalrymple," I heard. She saw the body. Her hands flew to her mouth. "Oh, God! Oh, no! Oh, no, no!" Agatha tried to regain dignity and failed. "She's dead, Tamsin. I think she's been here some time." A delivery driver, who had apparently been smoking round the back, burst in through the garden door. He took one look, swore softly, and retreated to lean against the counter, eyes wide. The kitchen, moments ago merely smug, now felt unbearably artificial. Everything gleamed except the still figure at the centre, and Agatha's sharp mind immediately began noting details. Serena's tea mug sat near her elbow, half full. A dusting of fine white crystals lay scattered around it, but on the side opposite the icing bowl. Odd. Tamsin fumbled for the phone. "I'll call the police. I'll get Bill." "You do that," Agatha said, though her voice wobbled. She took a step back, away from the body, away from the sticky sweetness of the scene. She had never particularly liked Serena, but death at one's own baking table, was unsettling in a way even Agatha could not dress in sarcasm. Bill Wong arrived with Mercester police in a flurry of boots and official murmurs. His expression tightened when he saw Agatha. "I told you to stay out of trouble for at least a week." "I didn't do this," Agatha hissed. "I came for a civilized discussion about sugar, hardly grounds for murder." "No one is accusing you," Bill said, though the constable behind him looked tempted. "Initial signs suggest a collapse. Diabetic, possibly. Overwork. Stress." Agatha sniffed. Serena Dalrymple would never collapse over work. She would outsource the fainting. Bill shot her a look. "Agatha, please." But Agatha was already scanning the kitchen again. The Slimmix canister sat upright, spotless, almost staged. The crystals near the tea mug looked lighter, finer, not quite matching the expensive blends displayed along the shelves. And a plain, nearly hidden bag of ordinary sugar had been shoved behind 3 tins of Snooty Sugar Lux. The amateurish concealment irked her. Serena may have been vain, but she was meticulous. Sloppy arrangements did not suit her personality. "Bill," Agatha said quietly, "something isn't right." "Something is very not right," he replied. "There's a dead woman in the kitchen. I mean, with the sugar." He sighed. "Agatha." Before he could deliver whatever lecture he had lined up, the sound of tires crunching on gravel signalled the arrival of more people. Villagers, drawn by the irresistible scent of scandal. Castley residents could detect gossip at 50 paces, and a police presence in Mercester might as well have been a brass band advertising "drama here." Among them was Veronica Pike, the elegant vicar's wife, whose support group, Sugar Sinners, encouraged virtuous self-denial. She hurried toward the house, clutching a folder. "I had a late morning appointment with Serena," she told the constable. "We were going to discuss a healthy baking collaboration." Her voice faltered as she entered the kitchen. She took one look at Serena's body, swayed and pressed a hand to her chest. "Oh, heavens! Oh, my!" Bill guided her to a chair. "Take a moment, Mrs. Pike." Agatha watched her with narrowed eyes. Veronica looked genuinely shocked, or very determined to appear so, but her attempt at composure cracked again when she noticed the Slimmix canister. Her eyes darted away from it as if it accused her personally. Interesting, very interesting. Tamsin, meanwhile, hovered in a corner, shaking violently. "She was fine yesterday," she whispered. "Just stressed. Investors were demanding reports, and someone had been spreading rumors. She wouldn't tell me who." Rumors, threats, investors, and Veronica's too tight expression. Agatha felt a familiar stirring. Not excitement exactly, but something returning to life inside her. A sense of puzzle, a sense of purpose. Bill finished speaking with the officers, then approached. "Agatha, I need you to go home. We'll handle this." Agatha bristled. "I'm not a child who needs sending to her room." "I know," Bill said gently. "But you have a talent for becoming entangled in things." "I didn't become entangled. I walked into a kitchen and found a corpse. Entirely different." "Agatha." She recognized the tone. Reasonable, steady, implacable. She hated it. "Fine," she snapped. "But you mark my words, this was no simple collapse. Something about that sugar isn't right." Bill raised an eyebrow. "We'll wait for the coroner before jumping to conclusions." "You always wait," Agatha muttered. "Waiting is dull." But she left, because staying would only mean being bodily escorted out, which did nothing for one's dignity. Outside, villagers whispered behind hands, their expressions bright with scandalized curiosity. Agatha kept her chin high and her pace brisk, though her mind churned. Back in her cottage, she collapsed onto the sofa, shaken more than she intended. Serena Dalrymple had been aggravating, patronizing, insufferably fashionable. But murder? Possibly. And Agatha had a front-row seat whether she liked it or not. Hodge padded over, leapt onto her lap, and settled with deliberate weight, as if anchoring her to the present moment. His purr filled the room like a tiny, steady engine. Agatha stroked his head absently. "You know, Hodge, I came for revenge, not a corpse." Hodge blinked. "And Bill thinks this was just an accident." The cat yawned, unimpressed by police conclusions. Agatha sighed. "Yes, well, I suppose we'll see." The kettle clicked in the background, cooling after Doris had washed up earlier. Hodge shifted, stretching one paw into her cardigan as though claiming ownership. Agatha allowed herself a small, wry smile. "Death by sugar. Trust my life to involve something so ridiculous." But even as she said it, she felt that unmistakable stirring again. Curiosity, sharp and insistent. Whatever happened in that kitchen, it wasn't ordinary, and Agatha Raisin hated nothing more than being kept in the dark. "Don't smirk like that, Mavis. It's unchristian." The W.I. Hall was barely open for the jumble sale and already humming with gleeful scandal. Agatha, entering with a bag of unwanted scarves, found half the village clustered around tables of chipped china and lopsided lamps, all pretending to care about bargains while pricking their ears for fresh gossip. Her humiliation from 2 nights earlier had been revived and reheated like a cheap casserole. She heard her own name whispered with far too much cheerfulness. Poor Agatha! Imagine finding her! Must have screamed the place down. Serena always was a bit sharp, wasn't she? Poetic justice, Mavis muttered, with precisely the smugness Mrs. Bloxby had been warning her about. Yes, well, poetic cruelty is still cruelty, Mrs. Bloxby said, straightening a stack of romance novels with serene precision. We mustn't revel in tragedy. Agatha strode over with her chin high. Tragedy is stretching it, she said, and if anyone is implying I enjoyed the discovery, they may kindly choke on a Slimmix sample. Several women blinked. A few coughed. Mrs. Bloxby smiled gently. We're glad you're all right, Agatha. It must have been quite a shock. It was disgusting, Agatha said. Finding someone slumped in icing puts a person right off baking. That'll be the first time for you, Mavis muttered. Agatha pretended not to hear. She dumped her scarf bag on the donation table and scanned the hall. Every conversation was a mixture of pity, speculation, and relish. That last ingredient irritated Agatha most. Carcelli could be kind, but goodness, it could be nosy. Near the bric-a-brac, Oliver the baker was lecturing a row of pensioners. I tell you, this fancy imported sugar nonsense was bound to lead to trouble. I even saw a cash-and-carry lorry outside Serena's place once. Hardly Parisian artisanal blends, eh? A ripple of delight travelled through the listeners. Agatha caught the hint of a clue there, or at least a decent hypocrisy. Before she could probe further, Doris appeared with a box of mismatched mugs. "Mrs. Raisin, Bill said he's coming by your cottage for tea after the sale." "Oh, splendid," Agatha said automatically. "I do enjoy being lectured before lunchtime." Doris blinked, unsure whether to agree. By midday, the sale had dissolved into gossip clusters. Tamsin Rowe appeared briefly, pale and nervous, apologizing to everyone in sight for existing. "Miss Dalrymple never meant to be unkind," she told Mrs. Mason, who merely sniffed. "She was under pressure. Investors, deadlines, you know how it is." "She wasn't very nice about your eclairs, though," Mrs. Mason said. "Horrid woman." Tamsin wilted at the reminder. She pushed herself too hard. She never slept. I'm sure it was just her condition. Agatha studied her. Tamsin looked devoted beyond reason. Possibly guilt. Possibly blind loyalty. Possibly something else entirely. Veronica Pike, meanwhile, floated through the hall with her usual polished grace, quashing every attempt at conversation with a curt, "Such a sad business. Nothing more to say." The very speed of her dismissal made Agatha's suspicion tingle. Veronica had been at the mill. Veronica had looked frightened. Veronica now wished to pretend she hadn't. Interesting. Very interesting. By the time Agatha escaped home, she felt as though she had been marinated in rumour. She found Doris in the kitchen, polishing cups for Bill's visit. "There's plenty of tea," Doris said, "and I put out a slice of lemon drizzle. It might calm your nerves." "My nerves are perfectly calm," Agatha announced, though her foot was tapping at a vindictive tempo. Hodge leapt into her lap before she could sit, settling with such decisive ownership that Agatha had no choice but to adjust herself around him. His reassuring purr softened her irritation, though only slightly. A knock sounded. Bill entered with the air of a man already weary of the conversation ahead. "Tea smells nice," he said, glancing at Hodge. The cat gave him a look that bordered on disdain. Agatha gestured imperiously toward a chair. "Sit, explain, and make it good." Bill sighed. "Agatha, the preliminary opinion is that Serena's death was a diabetic complication. The coroner needs to confirm it, but she had a known condition, a high-stress lifestyle, and—" "Oh, do spare me," Agatha cut in. "Serena Dalrymple collapsing over icing sounds like a lazy explanation, and you know it. Accidents happen. Not to people that organised." Bill folded his hands. "Wealthy London types with stressful businesses do sometimes drop dead. She was pushing herself too hard." Hodge purred louder, as though disagreeing. Agatha leaned forward. "Tell me this, Bill. If she was so careful, why were there fine sugar crystals around her tea mug instead of her cake? Why did the Slimmix tin look untouched? Why did she even have ordinary sugar shoved behind those posh tins?" Bill blinked. "Because kitchens get messy." "Not Serena's kitchen. That room looked curated." Bill rubbed his temples. "Agatha, you're seeing complications where there might be none." "Or," Agatha countered, "I'm seeing complications because they're actually there." He hesitated. That was enough for her. Doris reappeared with a plate. "Cake?" Bill took a piece automatically. "Look," he said, "I'm not dismissing your instinct, but until we have toxicology results, we can't assume foul play." "We?" Agatha repeated sharply. "I don't recall being sworn into the police this morning." Bill groaned. "Agatha," but she was already marching to the window, Hodge trotting after her. "Serena rarely ate her own cakes," Agatha said. "She lived on black coffee and self-promotion. Why would she suddenly start taste-testing icing?" Bill conceded. "That is odd." And Oliver saw a cash-and-carry lorry outside the mill, hardly the source of exclusive blends. "That's gossip." "All gossip has a kernel of truth," Agatha said. "Otherwise it would be boring." Bill set his cup down. Another villager mentioned an argument with an investor from Evesham. Something about misleading labels. "Oh?" Agatha turned, interest sharpening. "It doesn't mean murder." "No," Agatha said, "but it means motive." She watched him shift uncomfortably. He didn't want her involved. He also didn't want to admit she might be right. A familiar dynamic. As the afternoon waned, Agatha dragged herself to the vicarage coffee morning, where Veronica Pike presided with strained cheer. Veronica served oat biscuits that tasted like repentance. Every time someone mentioned Serena, Veronica changed the subject with jarring speed. "I barely knew her," Veronica insisted, We exchanged ideas about better habits, that's all. Agatha stared into her tea. Funny, I heard you had quite a heated discussion at the pub. Veronica froze. We were clarifying a charity order, nothing more. Her voice trembled, a red flag if Agatha ever heard one. Veronica, normally serene, radiated discomfort, and guilt often travelled in the same carriage. On her walk home, Carsley's gossip floated through the hedgerows like migrating birds. Heard the Sugar Queen lied about imports. Investor from Evesham is furious. Oliver said she deserved a nasty shock. Tamsin worshipped her. Suspicious. Each rumour added weight to the question already rooting itself in Agatha's mind. Had someone swapped Serena's precious sweetener for something far more dangerous? She reached her cottage feeling unsettled but electrified. The idea refused to fade. If the police insisted on calling it an accident, then fine. Let them. Agatha Raisin would simply prove them wrong. Inside, Hodge stretched luxuriously on the armchair, blinking as though he'd expected her revelation ages ago. Agatha set her bag down, unable to suppress a wry smile. "Well, darling," she murmured, "it looks like we have a murder to investigate." Hodge yawned, curled in a tighter ball, and flicked his tail. A small domestic blessing for the chaos to come. "Do stop glaring at the kettle, Agatha. It hasn't insulted you." Charles Fraith was lounging at her kitchen table as though he lived there, helping himself to toast piled with alarming amounts of marmalade. He had arrived uninvited at 8:30, newspaper tucked under his arm, murmuring something about tragic sugar collapses and excellent timing for a country breakfast. Agatha narrowed her eyes. When rich men appear without warning, they're usually after something. "Not I," Charles said cheerfully. "I came to observe the drama and pinch your toast." Agatha huffed, snatching the knife from him. "I suppose you've read all the nonsense about Serena's accidental collapse." "Of course." Marvellous headline. "Shame about the dead woman, obviously, but you must admit the articles are juicy." "Charles, she didn't just drop dead. Someone meddled with her sugar." He gave her a long, amused look. "Ah, so you're investigating again." "I'm not investigating," Agatha said, slicing fresh toast with unnecessary force. "I simply refuse to accept being made a fool of. Serena Dalrymple insulted me, then died in a ridiculous fashion, leaving the village to assume we'd been sparring over Eclair." "You were sparring over Eclair?" "That's beside the point." Hodge leapt onto the table, nudging Charles's elbow with the entitlement of a cat who knew every visitor ranked below him. Charles obliged with a scratch. "At least someone appreciates me." Agatha ignored them both. Serena's business was shady. Oliver saw a cash-and-carry lorry outside her mill, hardly the home of exotic blends. Charles perked up. Cash-and-carry? Or how deliciously common. And Tamsin looks ready to faint every time someone says Serena's name. Veronica Pike is practically sprinting away from the subject, and there was an investor from Evesham who argued with her. It's a perfect storm of deceit. Charles reached for another slice. "So what's your plan, Miss Marple?" She rolled her eyes. "Do not compare me to that old biddy. I'm far more glamorous." "Except when you're yelling at kettles." Agatha slammed the butter dish down. "We are going to Mercester, today, to the supplier Oliver mentioned. I want to know what Serena really bought." Charles brightened. "A field trip. Excellent. I'll drive." "No," Agatha said quickly. "Your car is too recognizable. We need discretion." "My car is elegant. Your car looks like it's been rejected by 3 scrapyards." "My car is perfectly respectable," Agatha insisted. "Get in." The cash-and-carry sat in an industrial stretch on the outskirts of Mercester, a fluorescent-lit cavern stacked with catering-sized sacks and boxes, smelling faintly of cardboard and ambition. It was the opposite of everything Serena had projected. Practical, ugly, and cheap. "How ghastly," Charles murmured. "Serena would die twice if she saw this place." "That's the idea," Agatha whispered. "We want information, not decor critique." She marched to the counter and adopted what she privately called her London professional tone, the one she used when people needed to believe she had influence. "Good morning, Agatha Raisin. I require details about recent orders made by the Snooty Sugar Company." The manager, a brisk man with thinning hair and the expression of someone impossible to impress, looked her over. "We don't give out client details." I'm not asking for secrets, Agatha said sweetly. Just confirming deliveries. I'm arranging a special feature for a lifestyle publication. Charles stepped forward, leaning casually on the counter. BBC Food, you know how it is. We're profiling regional producers. The man straightened, mildly flattered. Ah, well, Agatha seized the moment. We only want accuracy. Your cooperation ensures positive coverage. The manager hesitated, then said, Right, well, yes, Serena Dalrymple did order from us, regularly. He pulled out a folder. Catering sugar, industrial sweetener, a few specialty items, diet blends mostly, cheap stuff. We mentioned better quality options, but she said price mattered more than branding. Agatha and Charles exchanged a glance. Cheap, industrial, diet blends, the opposite of imported boutique sugar. And these? Agatha asked, nudging a stack of unbranded bags marked Diet Sweet Blend. Oh, she ordered those in bulk, the manager said. Same number every month. But 2 weeks ago she placed an unusually large order of high-strength artificial sweetener. Strong stuff, not for amateur use. Clue, a significant one. Agatha felt her pulse sharpen. Do you have invoices? She asked lightly. Not for public eyes. Charles clapped the manager on the shoulder. Understandable, absolutely. Though VAT procedures lately have been quite complicated, haven't they? The manager groaned. Don't start. I've got headaches as it is. He reached for a ledger. Look, fine. Just a glance. Don't copy anything. Agatha bent over the page as if admiring an artwork. Dates, amounts, product names. Her mind catalogued every line. And there it was. A double order of an intense pharmaceutical-grade sweetener, logged exactly 14 days before Serena died. Her breath caught. Very helpful, Agatha said, stepping back. We appreciate your cooperation, truly. We'll make sure the article reflects your professionalism, Charles added. Lovely, the manager said, already bored. Outside, Agatha almost bounced. This is it, Charles. Strong artificial sweetener, twice the normal order, exactly when Serena was panicking about rumours. Someone tampered with her private stash. Charles, adjusting his scarf, said, Or she tampered with it. Fraud can get quite messy. Don't ruin this, Agatha snapped. If Serena lied about her blends, she was desperate to hide it. Someone might have wanted to stop that truth getting out. Villagers, investors, health people, Charles mused. Plenty of candidates. Agatha beamed. We're getting closer. They stopped in Evesham for lunch at a bistro Charles claimed was the only tolerable place for 20 miles. As platters clattered and cutlery chimed around them, Charles leaned back with the ease of a man who believed lunch was the rightful centerpiece of any investigation. So, he said, spearing a tomato, Serena was probably committing simple fraud. Cheap blends, fancy labels, a marketing grin. Happens constantly in London. Agatha sniffed. You make it sound normal. Fraud is fraud. Oh, it is, Charles agreed, but the motive becomes clearer. Someone found out. Someone with money involved. As if summoned, a sharply dressed man entered the bistro and froze upon seeing them. He stormed toward their table. Oh dear, Charles murmured, here comes thunder. Giles Corbett, the Evesham investor mentioned in village gossip, slapped a newspaper onto the table. She's made me a laughingstock, he barked. His face was red, his jaw tight. Creative accounting, dishonest labelling, and now the press imply I backed a fraud. Agatha raised an eyebrow. We were just discussing your name. Good, he said bitterly. Discuss how I've been ruined. Serena lied about everything. Imports, profits, shelf life, all fiction. And you argued with her recently, Agatha said. Giles stiffened. Yes, loudly, and I regret nothing. His eyes flashed. But don't you dare suggest I wished her harm. She owed me money. He stormed off, leaving the air buzzing. Charles let out a low whistle. What an excellent suspect. Indeed, Agatha said, satisfied. Angry, financially wounded, short temper, classic. But as she watched Giles pace outside, she sensed the misdirection. Men like him preferred shouting to subtle poison. Still, he served nicely as a red herring. When Agatha returned home, Doris met her at the door with wide eyes. Mrs. Raisin. Tamsin phoned. She sounded terrified. Asked if you'd told the police anything about special orders. Agatha's pulse quickened. Special orders? That's what she said. Asked you to call her back urgently." Agatha felt a spark of pure satisfaction. She loved when suspects panicked early. It saved time. "Thank you, Doris," she said briskly. "This is getting interesting." As she climbed the stairs, Hodge sauntered ahead, tail held high like a banner of feline superiority. Agatha paused at her bedroom door, the gears of her mind whirring faster. "A secret order of extra-strong sweetener," she murmured. "Tamsin afraid, an investor furious, a vicar's wife hiding something, Serena lying to everyone." Hodge hopped onto the bed, curling with theatrical poise. Agatha smiled at him. "Well, darling, the sugar's starting to clump, and I suspect the truth will be terribly sticky." Hodge blinked, flicked his tail, and settled in, a quiet, cosy punctuation to the rising storm. Hodge was already causing trouble before Agatha had finished her first sip of tea. The cat sat triumphantly on the kitchen table, one paw tapping at a small plastic tub he had liberated from her handbag. Each tap sent the tub wobbling dangerously close to the edge, as though Hodge were conducting an experiment in feline gravity. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Agatha snapped, "must you start the morning by sabotaging my belongings?" Hodge ignored her, batting the tub again. This time it rolled, bounced against her toast plate, and skittered across the table with a mischievous rattle. Agatha grabbed it. Inside were several small white tablets, samples Tamsin had pressed into her hand at the Red Lion, apologizing breathlessly and insisting Agatha try them just once. "Slimmick Sweet Tabs," the label promised in perky lettering. "Indulgence without guilt." "Guilt is the least of my problems," Agatha muttered, shaking the container. 3 tablets clicked sharply. Hodge's ears twitched at the sound, as if daring her to open it. She didn't. Artificial sweeteners always struck her as vaguely sinister, too clean, too chalky, too full of self-righteous marketing. Still, she had accepted the samples out of politeness. Tamsin had looked so anxious that refusing felt like kicking a puppy. A knock sounded. Before Agatha could move, the door opened and Tamsin stepped inside, eyes red, clutching a bulging folder to her chest. "I'm so sorry to bother you. I wasn't sure where else to go," she said, voice cracking. "Tamsin, sit," Agatha commanded. "You look like an understudy who's just ruined opening night." Tamsin sank into a chair. "Everything's falling apart. Serena would kill me for even being here." "Well, she won't," Agatha said bluntly. "Start talking." Tamsin dabbed at her eyes. "You were right. Serena wasn't importing anything. She was diluting standard sugar with artificial sweetener, cheap blends, and then rebranding them as exclusive low-calorie artisanal sugars." "Fraud," Agatha said, "at a rather grubby level." "Yes," Tamsin whispered, "and she knew some customers were depending on her blends for health reasons. People with diabetes, diet plans. Veronica Pike's whole Sugar Sinners group relied on her products." She wrung her hands. "I tried to tell her it was unethical. She said I could leave if I didn't like it, and she'd make sure I never worked for a reputable company again." Agatha arched an eyebrow. "Yet you stayed." "I had to. The salary was good, and it meant I could move out of my parents' house. Serena promised references, contacts, a future." Tamsin's voice wobbled. "She gave me a chance." Agatha's eyes sharpened. "So you admired her?" "I admired what she appeared to be," Tamsin whispered, "not what she became." A fair point, but admiration mixed with dependence mixed with resentment was a volatile recipe. Motive, even if accidental. Agatha tapped the tub of sweet tabs. "Why did you give me these?" Tamsin flinched. Serena had been developing a new line, concentrated tablets, but she refused to test them herself. She said artificial sweeteners made her dizzy. She had a condition, you see. Diabetes, I think. She was obsessive about what she could safely use. "Obsessive enough to keep her personal supply separate?" Agatha asked. "Yes," Tamsin said eagerly. "She always kept her approved sweetener in a small tin by the kettle. Only her doctor, Veronica Pike, and I knew about it." Agatha inhaled sharply. That matched the placement of the Slimmix canister in Serena's kitchen. Something didn't fit. "And yet on the day she died," Agatha murmured, "the sweetener by the kettle was her own branded Slimmix, not a personal tin." Tamsin's breath caught. "But she never used Slimmix herself. She said it tasted like wet chalk." Agatha allowed a slow, grim nod. "Fascinating." Tamsin pressed trembling fingers to her temple. "There's more. Serena wasn't only lying about sugar. She was manipulating investors. She'd promised Giles Corbett impossible returns. When he threatened to pull out, she told me she had a plan to shut him up permanently. Not murder, she added hastily, seeing Agatha's expression. Just a legal maneuver. But still. Still motive, Agatha said. Tamsin collapsed against the chair back. This is why I had to talk to you. Serena was spiraling, and I'm terrified the police will think I had something to do with it. Agatha studied her. The girl's fear looked genuine, but fear and guilt often wore the same coat. Did you ever tamper with Serena's sugar? Agatha asked. Tamsin stared at her hands. Once, she whispered, but not like you think. She had humiliated me in front of buyers, so I swapped her tasting sugar with an extra strong blend. I only meant to give her a mild dizzy spell. And did you? Agatha asked. Tamsin nodded, eyes brimming. She went white and had to sit down. I felt awful. I never did it again. A red herring, perhaps, or a confession masked as contrition. Agatha's tone softened. Why come now? Why today? Tamsin pushed the folder across the table. Invoices, orders, notes she made about different sweeteners. I thought, if someone swapped her personal tin with Slimmix, it might show up here. Or maybe someone placed a special order. She kept everything. Agatha opened the folder. Colour-coded tabs, meticulous handwriting, profit projections, delivery receipts. Serena had been many things, but chaotic was not one of them. And what do you think happened, Tamsin? Agatha asked. Tamsin clasped her hands tightly. I think someone gave her the wrong sweetener deliberately. Someone who knew exactly what she could and couldn't tolerate. Agatha thought of Veronica Pike's pale face at the mill, Giles's fury, Oliver's resentment, Tamsin's own bitterness. Plenty of options, none tidy. Thank you, Agatha said at last. You've been helpful. Tamsin exhaled shakily, then rose. Please don't tell Bill everything yet. I'm afraid of how it will look. Bill won't arrest anyone without proof, Agatha said. He's annoyingly cautious. Tamsin attempted a smile, failed, and slipped out the door. Agatha stared at the notes spread across her table. Fraud, health risks, investor tension, a secret medical condition known only to a few, a swapped sweetener tin. It felt like assembling a jigsaw with half the pieces face down. Hodge, bored of human complications, swatted the plastic tub again, sending it rolling toward the edge. Stop that! Agatha grabbed it, but too late. One tablet popped free, bounced, and skittered under the sofa with a faint click. Agatha crouched, muttering. Her fingers brushed dust, a stray sock, a button, and finally the tablet. She pulled it out and froze. It smelled wrong. Not the faint artificial sweetness she expected. No. Sharper, bitter, chemical, something that made her nose wrinkle. A faint unease prickled her skin. Hodge meowed, unimpressed by her revelation. Agatha set the tablet on the table, staring at it as though it might speak. What on earth were you feeding your customers, Serena? The question hovered in the warm kitchen like a ghost of burnt sugar. She scooped up Hodge, holding him close as she considered her next move. We're getting closer, darling, and someone out there is getting nervous. Hodge yawned magnificently, flicking his tail against her chin. A soft, domestic reminder that mysteries were best solved with a cat nearby. The telephone shrieked with such theatrical urgency that Agatha nearly spilled her tea. Before she could bark hello, Roy Silver's breathless voice burst through the receiver. Agatha! Darling! Tell me everything. I heard you're tangled up in some Sugar Corpse thing, and honestly, if you don't give me the exclusive, I'll die. Agatha pinched the bridge of her nose. Roy, it's 8 a.m. News never sleeps, sweetheart, especially not glamorous news with murder, diet culture, and provincial tears. I'm already on the train. Wear something sharp. What? No, Roy. But the line had already gone dead, leaving only the faint echo of London's self-importance crackling through the receiver. Agatha stared at Hodge, who blinked as though unimpressed with metropolitan hysteria. 20 minutes later, Roy Silver burst through the cottage door in a cloud of aftershave so powerful it could have been weaponized. His scarf, a flamboyant swirl of colours that looked like an argument between tropical birds, nearly knocked over Doris as he swept in. My poor tragic darling, Roy exclaimed, grabbing Agatha by the shoulders. You find one corpse and suddenly the entire sugar industry collapses. This is divine timing. It's not divine, Agatha said. It's annoying. And stop sniffing around for gossip. Bill's already lectured me. Roy waved this off. I have a lead. A major London columnist has agreed to meet us. Serena's Snooty Sugar enterprise may be the next huge consumer scandal, and your name could be splashed across the coverage. Why on earth would I want that? Because you crave relevance like other women crave chocolate eclairs. Agatha opened her mouth to retort, but grudgingly admitted he had a point. And, far worse, she enjoyed it. By late morning, they were in London, jostled along by crowds who moved as though auditioning for a competition in impatience. Agatha felt oddly exposed in her countryside coat, painfully aware of patisserie windows brimming with glossy pastries, whispering temptations she was determined to ignore. Roy marched her into a stylish cafe filled with people who looked permanently dissatisfied. Our contact arrives in 5, he declared, consulting a planner he had no intention of following. The food columnist materialized in a swish of monochrome elegance. Miranda Vale had cheekbones sharp enough to slice a lemon, and the cool, poised confidence of someone accustomed to demolishing restaurants with a single paragraph. Agatha Raisin, Miranda said, seating herself gracefully. And Roy, I've heard the most alarming rumours. Agatha leaned forward defensively. I assure you I had nothing to do with— Oh, not about you, Miranda said. About Serena Dalrymple. Word is her artisanal blends contain dangerously high levels of harsh sweeteners. Some samples were anonymously submitted to a lab. The results were rather damning, and Serena spent the past month trying to quash the story. Agatha felt a chill of vindication and dread. Harsh sweetener? Miranda nodded. Something industrial, cheap, potent, and wholly inappropriate for regular consumption. For individuals with health vulnerabilities, it could cause severe reactions. Roy clapped his hands delightedly. This is enormous. Fraud, deception, health crisis, and a dramatic death. You couldn't write better. Thank you, Agatha said tartly. I'm trying. Miranda continued. A competitor sent the samples anonymously. They suspected Serena of lying about origin and composition. It seems they were right. Which competitor? Agatha pressed. Several disliked her, but one in particular, a Mercester baker, I believe, Oliver something. Agatha exchanged a look with Roy. Oliver the baker. Yes, and investors were nervous, health campaigners too. Serena was sitting atop a scandal with the stability of a 3-legged table. Her death has conveniently silenced everything, for now. Roy gasped with theatrical horror, which means murder to prevent exposure. Miranda raised a delicate eyebrow. I merely said the timing is interesting, but motives abound. Angry investors, betrayed customers, furious competitors, health figures like that vicar's wife who runs a support group. Veronica Pike, Agatha murmured, skittish as a rabbit in headlights lately. Roy tugged her arm. We mustn't dismiss the corporate angle either. A big manufacturer could be behind the bad blends. Perhaps Serena stumbled into something larger, something shadowy. Agatha frowned. That sounds like one of your television pitches. Yes, but it could still be true, Roy insisted. Just imagine a giant sweetener conglomerate covering their tracks, hired goons disguised as pastry chefs, blackmail by marzipan. Roy, Agatha said, stop before my brain leaks from my ears. Miranda smiled thinly. Corporate involvement is always a tempting story, but people love to imagine conspiracies where there are none. A subtle warning, or a hint. Agatha wasn't sure. As they left the cafe, Roy floated beside her. This is delightful. You're practically living inside a documentary, Agatha. We must capitalize. Roy, this isn't a TV pitch. A woman is dead. Yes, but from a storytelling perspective. Roy. He subsided with a sigh, though she could see ideas propelling behind his eyes like rogue fireworks. Their next stop was a glossy magazine office buried inside a building so sleek it seemed coated in irony. Roy forced Agatha into a whirlwind of introductions, gossip, and impromptu photo opportunities. Agatha was complimented, critiqued, ignored, patted, and questioned in equal measure. By the end, she felt wrung out like damp laundry. I need air, she muttered, fleeing down the steps. London bustle smacked into her like a wave. Traffic honked, people shouted. A delivery boy whizzed past, nearly destroying Roy's scarf in the process. She tugged Roy toward the station. I'm done. London sucks the soul from a woman. But you were marvelous, Roy said. They adored your rural authenticity. That means they think I'm rustic. Oh yes, Roy said brightly. Charming, though. Agatha swatted at him but couldn't suppress a begrudging smirk. On the train home, exhaustion swaddled her like an itchy blanket. Roy flipped through glossy magazines, muttering dramatic commentary. The Sweet Deceiver. That would be a perfect title for your case profile. Giles Corbett, furious investor, deliciously villainous. Veronica Pike, betrayed crusader or sugar-scented angel of doom. Agatha half listened, half studied the small packet of diet biscuits Roy had bought in London. She nibbled one, regretted it instantly, and set the wretched thing aside. Its chalky texture reminded her of the Slimmix sweet tab she had sniffed earlier that morning, the sharp, chemical bitterness that prickled the senses unpleasantly. Her mind whirred. Serena kept her personal sweetener separate. Tamsin insisted she never use Slimmix. Yet Slimmix sat by the kettle the day she died, and someone had ordered a massive batch of extra-strong industrial sweetener shortly before Serena's collapse. Miranda's warning echoed. Dangerously high levels of harsh sweetener, harmful to sensitive users. Serena had medical vulnerabilities. Someone close to her knew that. Someone with access to her private kitchen. Someone who could place a single tablet in the wrong tin. Agatha felt a cold certainty settle in her stomach. This wasn't corporate espionage, not a glamorous big-scale conspiracy, not a shadowy manufacturer or hired pastry goons. No, this was intimate, quiet, nastier for its simplicity. A domestic betrayal. Roy leaned in. You look fierce. Have you solved it? No, Agatha said slowly, but the shape of it is changing. This wasn't the work of a giant corporation, Roy. It was personal. Someone who knew exactly what Serena could tolerate and what she couldn't. Roy shivered with delighted dread. Oh, darling, that's so much more dramatic. Agatha didn't answer. She was thinking of Veronica's pale face, of Tamsin's trembling guilt, of Oliver's bitterness, of Giles's rage. Each suspect hovered in her mind, shadows sharpened by motive and opportunity. Back in Carsley that evening, she stepped into her warm cottage, kicking off her shoes with an unladylike grunt. Hodge greeted her by stretching luxuriously on the rug, his tail flicking with smug indifference to human troubles. Agatha dropped her bag, knelt beside him, and stroked his head. You know, darling, she murmured, everyone's looking in the wrong direction. This wasn't a grand plot. It was a quiet nudge in the wrong place. Hodge blinked, unimpressed, and rolled onto his side. Agatha exhaled, letting the kettle sigh behind her. Someone, she whispered, murdered Serena in the simplest way possible. And for the first time she felt close, uncomfortably close, to the truth. There had better not be another parcel from London, Agatha muttered, eyeing the small paper bag sitting on her doorstep like a disgruntled pigeon. She had barely returned from her exhausting day with Roy, and already the world conspired to torment her. Hodge trotted past her legs, flicking his tail with supreme disinterest. He sniffed the bag once, made a small, offended sound, and stalked indoors as though washing his paws of human nonsense. Agatha crouched, loosening the knot. Inside lay an unsettling jumble, sugar sachets, sweetener packets, several ripped open so their grains spilled like pale sand. A faint chemical tang clung to the air. Nestled among them was a scrap of paper bearing blocky handwriting. Stop stirring, or you'll get burned. Agatha felt a prickle down her spine. Not fear exactly, but irritation sharpened by unease. Of all the melodramatic juvenile, she snapped upright, marched indoors, and jabbed the phone. Bill Wong, she announced when he answered. I've received a pathetic little threat. Bring your notebook, your detective glare, and anything else appropriate. Bill arrived within minutes, shoulders slumped as if expecting disaster. Agatha, he began, please tell me this isn't another situation where you've accidentally encouraged— I have done nothing, Agatha snapped, except investigate a murder you lot are dragging your feet on. Bill peered into the paper bag. Anonymous? Delivered while you were out? Yes, a thrilling development, if one forgets the immaturity of the message. Bill's expression was weary but concerned. Agatha, this is serious. Someone's trying to warn you off. Oh, don't say that. They're trying to intimidate me, which is quite different. Anyway, you should be pleased. It means I'm right. It means, Bill said patiently, that you're in the middle of something dangerous. Bill, Agatha said crisply, do stop making it sound romantic. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. Fine. But listen to me. The toxicology results came back. Serena didn't die of a diabetic collapse. She ingested a dangerous quantity of a harsh artificial sweetener not prescribed for her condition. Agatha went still. Bill continued, voice low. This wasn't an accident. Someone gave it to her. And the official line? A murder inquiry, Bill admitted. But I can't tell you much more. You just did, Agatha said triumphantly. Someone used sweetener to kill her. Probably swapped her personal tin. I didn't say that, Bill protested. No, but your face did. Bill groaned. Agatha. Bill, you're a dear, but you underestimate your own transparency. He pinched the bridge of his nose, defeated. Just stay out of trouble. Agatha's snort could have curdled milk. You may as well ask the vicar to stop preaching. Fine. Just be careful, please. His earnestness made her soften for a moment, a fleeting moment. After Bill left, Agatha paced in agitation. The anonymous bag on her doorstep felt theatrical, yes, but the threat was unmistakably real. Someone close enough to observe her movements. Someone rattled. She needed clarity, and there was only one place for moral clarity in Carsley, the vicarage. Mrs. Bloxby welcomed her with warm eyes and a gentle smile. The vicarage sitting room smelled of furniture polish, simmering tea, and the faintly dusty calm of places designed for quiet reflection. A perfect antidote to Agatha's stormy mood. Sit down, Agatha. You're looking rather troubled. Someone left a threatening bag of sugar on my doorstep, Agatha announced, flinging herself into a chair. Honestly, the drama. Oh dear, Mrs. Bloxby said mildly. Perhaps some tea? Yes, Agatha said, though tea rarely soothed her. And a biscuit, if they're not those dreadful diet ones Roy forced upon me. Mrs. Bloxby poured tea with serene precision. Tell me everything. Agatha spilled the entire sordid tangle. Serena's fraud, the industrial sweeteners, the bitter tablets, Veronica's evasiveness, Tamsin's trembling confessions, Giles's fury, the anonymous lab results, and now the dramatic doorstep threat. Mrs. Bloxby listened with her usual unflappable calm, hands gently folded around her cup. When Agatha finally paused for air, the vicar's wife said softly, People who make a virtue of self-denial often live in terrible fear of their own weaknesses. Agatha blinked. What does that have to do with murder? Sometimes everything, Mrs. Bloxby said, sipping her tea. Take Veronica, for example. She has built an identity around her sugar sinners group, helping others resist temptation. Yet I hear she's been seen leaving Oliver's bakery rather a lot lately, carrying boxes she claims are for the parish. Oliver makes quite indulgent pastries. Agatha's eyebrows shot upward. Veronica Pike? Hoarding pastries? That sanctimonious woman. She must be mortified. Mrs. Bloxby nodded gently. When one preaches restraint, one fears hypocrisy being exposed. If Serena's blends were harmful, and Veronica had been encouraging parishioners to use them, her reputation would crumble, Agatha finished. She'd look like a fraud, a leader pushing a dangerous product. Mrs. Bloxby did not confirm, but her steady gaze spoke volumes. Agatha leaned forward, pulse quickening. And Veronica was at the mill the day Serena died, and she's been running from the subject ever since, and she knew about Serena's medical condition. Mrs. Bloxby said softly, Fear can twist people more than anger ever could. Agatha sat back, considering. Veronica had motive, knowledge, and enough shame to crumble under pressure. But shame alone didn't always lead to murder, and she wasn't the only one feeling desperate. There's also Giles, Agatha said reluctantly. I heard he threatened to sue Serena days before she died. Mrs. Bloxby nodded. A man like that is familiar with anger, but anger tends to roar loudly, not silently swap sweeteners. Agatha felt a flicker of reluctant agreement. Giles raged like a bonfire, too noisy, too obvious. Mrs. Bloxby continued, You've identified many motives. Financial panic, reputation, resentment. But what about fear? Fear of exposure, fear of harm, fear of losing the roles we cling to. Agatha frowned. Are you suggesting Serena was killed by someone she frightened? Mrs. Bloxby merely folded her hands. I'm saying, do not look only for villains, Agatha. Sometimes tragedies begin with frightened people making dreadful choices. The words sank into Agatha like a slow, unsettling stone. She respected Mrs. Bloxby's insights, even when they nudged her off her preferred path of righteous certainty. She rose, forcing a lighter tone. "Well, if someone thinks sugar threats will stop me, they are sorely mistaken. I've been insulted by the best." Mrs. Bloxby's smile was warm. "Just be careful, my dear. Pride can blind even the sharpest detective." Agatha nearly retorted that she was too vain to be blind, then realized that was entirely the sort of thing Mrs. Bloxby meant. She settled for a huff. As she stepped outside, dusk had settled into the hedgerows, tinting the village lanes with soft shadows. Lights glowed warmly in cottage windows. Somewhere a dog barked. It should have felt soothing. But Mrs. Bloxby's words pressed on her mind. Fear rather than evil. Veronica's fear of weakness exposed. Tamsin's fear of losing her career. Giles's fear of losing his money. Oliver's fear of going under. Even Serena herself had lived in constant fear. Of failure, of exposure, of illness. Perhaps the killer had acted not out of malice but desperation. Agatha shivered, though not from cold. Murder committed by the frightened felt far more unpredictable than murder committed by the wicked. When she reached her cottage, Hodge sat in the window, tail curled neatly around him like a furry punctuation mark. His green eyes blinked in welcome, or judgment. Inside, the kettle let out a sigh as though relieved to see her return. Agatha stroked Hodge's back, feeling the solid warmth of him. "Well, darling," she murmured, "apparently we're hunting someone who panicked rather than plotted." Hodge yawned, unbothered by human complexities. Agatha poured tea, letting the steam curl around her thoughts. Fear, she reflected, could make sugar very dangerous indeed. "Right, everyone sit down and stop gawping," Agatha commanded, sweeping into the WI hall with the regal force of a general preparing for battle. She had labelled the gathering an emergency suite fair planning meeting, but the villagers saw through that at once. The hall was packed. Nothing delighted Castley more than an emergency, especially one dressed up as baking administration. The tables had been laid with biscuits, sugar bowls, sachets, jars and tubs, creating a mildly accusatory display. Tension hummed between the cake plates. Agatha tapped the table. "We need clarity, we need honesty, and we need it now." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Agatha, noticing the thrill in their faces, lifted her chin. Well, if they wanted theatre, they would get theatre. Her gaze locked on Tamsin. "Tamsin, dear," she said in a tone that could curdle custard, "would you care to explain why you tampered with Serena's sweetener before her tasting session last week?" Tamsin froze. Her hands twisted the edge of her jumper. I didn't mean—" "You admitted it once," Agatha said sharply. "Tell the room." The crowd leaned forward. Chairs creaked. Someone rustled a biscuit wrapper with guilty excitement. Tamsin swallowed hard. "Serena yelled at me. She said I was useless. I swapped her personal tin for a different brand. I only wanted to spoil a batch of icing, that's all. She got dizzy, but she was fine later." A gasp. Then a hush. Agatha pounced. "And you expect us to believe you stopped there? That you never touched her things again, not once, after you discovered how easy it was?" Tamsin looked stricken. "No, I didn't. I wasn't even—" "Oh, come on, girl," Agatha pressed, heart thudding with the thrill of a dramatic reveal. "You adored Serena. In that twisted, needy way assistants worship tyrants. You thought you could teach her a lesson again, only this time you went too far." The room erupted. Voices clashed. She did look jealous of Serena. I knew there was something odd about her. "Poor girl's been through enough." Tamsin burst into tears, hands to her face. "I never meant to hurt her. I just wanted her to stop lying. She said she'd ruin my references if I didn't help her repackage the blends. But I didn't touch anything that day. I swear it." A commanding voice cut through the din. "That's enough." Bill Wong strode forward, face thunderous. "Agatha Raisin, what on earth do you think you're doing?" "Solving your case," Agatha snapped, "by staging an amateur courtroom." Bill's tone could have shaved wallpaper. "You've humiliated a young woman in front of half the Cotswolds. She's hiding something." "She was out collecting a delivery when the tampering occurred," Bill said coldly. "Forensic results confirm it happened very close to Serena's time of death," Bill said. "The window's tighter now. Tamsin wasn't even in the building." Agatha felt heat crawl up her neck. A few villagers exchanged satisfied looks, sensing the delicious turn of tables. Bill continued. Accusing people without evidence helps no one. It certainly doesn't help the investigation. A low murmur filled the hall. Not loud, but unmistakably critical. "She's doing it again," whispered someone. "Treating a death like a game," murmured another. "Poor Tamsin, the girl's terrified," said a third. Humiliation struck Agatha like a slap, sharper and deeper than the sting of Chapter 1's WI disaster. This time she couldn't even claim innocence. She had gone too far. Tamsin, shaking, fled the hall. A few women hurried after her, fussing and clucking like protective hens. Agatha remained standing, spine-rigid, fury and shame tangling inside her chest. Bill's disappointed look did not help. He leaned toward her. "You need to be more careful. You're losing your empathy." "I have never possessed any empathy," Agatha snapped, though the words felt thin even as she spoke them. Bill shook his head and left, the hall parting around him. The meeting dissolved into an excited swarm of voices. Agatha felt the weight of every stare, some accusing, some gleeful, some pitying, which was far worse. She swept up her handbag and stormed toward the door. But as she went, two things happened, both far more important than the public humiliation she'd endured. First, Oliver the baker coughed discreetly. "Mrs. Raisin, if I might have a word." Agatha, brittle and smarting, almost dismissed him, but Oliver looked pale and nervous, and nothing in Carsley made a baker pale without good reason. "What is it?" "Well," Oliver said, scratching his ear, "I saw Veronica Pike at the mill the day Serena died." Agatha blinked. "Veronica? At the mill? Why?" "She said she was checking on the charity cakes, but she was alone in the kitchen, stayed there longer than seemed necessary." Agatha's heart gave a small, triumphant leap, but she kept her expression neutral. "Thank you, Oliver. Most helpful." He nodded and shuffled away, relieved to pass the burden on. The second clue came moments later from an anxious woman in a floral blouse, one of the sugar sinners. "Mrs. Raisin," she whispered, glancing around, "you didn't hear this from me." "Of course I didn't," Agatha said, leaning in. "It's Veronica. She binges on sweets in private, boxes of them. She made us all switch to Serena's Slimmix so nobody would see her buying sugar. Serena kept her secret." Agatha's breath caught. "Veronica begged Serena to keep sending her discreet orders," the woman continued. "If the blends were exposed as dangerous, Veronica would look like a fraud. Worse, a hypocrite." The woman scurried away, guilt making her steps hurried. Agatha stood still, the hall draining around her, the clues arranging themselves like new tiles in a familiar pattern. Veronica hiding a sweet tooth. Veronica relying on Serena's secret blends. Veronica terrified of exposure. Veronica alone in the mill kitchen. Veronica preaching virtue while sneaking pastries. A woman clinging to moral authority, trapped by her own contradictions. Now that was a motive. Agatha stepped outside, the village air cool against her burning cheeks. She began walking home, each step softening her earlier fury. The humiliation hurt, of course it did, but beneath it simmered something different, genuine reflection. She had bullied Tamsin. She had let her thirst for victory override compassion, and she had been wrong. Mrs. Bloxby's words from the previous evening drifted back. People who make a virtue of self-denial often live in terrible fear of their own weaknesses. Agatha sighed. Murder, it seemed, was not committed only by villains. It was often committed by frightened, crumbling people trying desperately to hold their masks in place. When she reached her cottage, Hodge sat on the hallway rug, tail curled neatly around him like a furry comma. He stared as if asking whether she'd finally stopped blustering. "Oh, hush," Agatha told him, scooping him into her arms. "Everyone makes mistakes." Hodge blinked, unimpressed. The kettle clicked on with a soft, domestic sigh. Agatha pressed her cheek briefly to Hodge's fur, inhaling the warm, familiar scent. "Looks like we're back to square one," she murmured. "But this time, darling, I think we're looking at the wrong woman entirely." Hodge stretched, a slow, regal extension of limbs, the final punctuation on a chastening day. And Agatha, humbled and thoughtful, began piecing together a new theory, one that pointed not to the weak or frightened assistant, but to a woman who had spent years pretending she was stronger than everyone else. Agatha glared at her breakfast as though it had personally insulted her. "Porridge," she muttered, prodding the grey mound, "the food of penitents and prisoners." Hodge, perched on a dining chair like a furry magistrate, blinked at her with faint amusement. His tail curled neatly around his paws, as if waiting for her to admit defeat and fetch something more civilized. "Don't smirk," she told him. "I'm being healthy. It's practically heroic." The cat yawned. Agatha pushed the bowl away. "Right. Enough virtue. Time to confront Veronica Pike." Saying the name out loud sharpened her resolve. Public theatrics had blown up in her face yesterday. If she wanted answers, she needed finesse rather than fireworks. She hated that fact more than the porridge. At the neighbouring parish vicarage, Veronica Pike's front garden looked aggressively well-tended. Every shrub seemed clipped into moral perfection. Agatha marched up the path, privately noting that immaculate gardens usually concealed rotting fences somewhere. She rang the bell. Veronica opened the door with her usual gracious frostiness. "Mrs. Raisin, what an unexpected visit." "You sound thrilled," Agatha replied, stepping inside before she could be refused. "Thought we might talk about Slimmix and Serena." A muscle fluttered in Veronica's jaw. "If you insist. Tea?" "Yes, strong, and none of that herbal stuff you pretend to like." The parish ladies would laugh. Even my husband. She broke off, eyes glancing at the medication bottle. "Everything I've worked for would crumble." Agatha pounced gently. "And did you confront her?" "Yes. I threatened to withdraw support, that was all. She told me I was replaceable." The words came out strangled. "She said she might expose me if I made trouble." Agatha watched her closely. "Expose what?" Veronica's composure wavered. "My lapses." She gestured at the hidden biscuit tin. "I'm weak, Mrs. Raisin. I preach discipline while fighting my own battles every day. If anyone knew, they'd call me a fraud." It was almost pitiable. Almost. Agatha softened her tone just a notch. "Fighting private weakness doesn't make you a murderer." "Doesn't it?" Veronica whispered. "Shame can drive people to terrible choices." A tremor ran through her hands. Something raw passed across her face, too quick for Agatha to pin down. She filed it away. Changing tactics, Agatha said casually. "Forensic timing is becoming clearer. Whoever tampered with Serena's sweetener tin had to have access very close to the time of death. You handled Slimmix often, didn't you?" Veronica's expression cracked for a heartbeat. Barely a flash, but unmistakable. Fear. Then the mask fell neatly back into place. "I went to the mill that morning, yes. Serena asked me to check on some charity cakes, but I wasn't alone in the kitchen for long." "Long enough?" Agatha asked softly. Veronica stood abruptly. "I think this conversation is over." Agatha rose too, unwilling to push further. She'd seen what she needed to see, the guilt, the panic, and something deeper, anxious self-preservation. At the door, Veronica said stiffly, "You're meddling, Mrs. Raisin. You're stirring things best left alone." Agatha gave her a sharp smile. "Oh, I never leave things alone." She walked back toward Carsley with brisk steps, replaying the visit. Veronica had motive rooted in shame, private failures, and fear of exposure. But something still didn't fit. The panic felt real, yet there had been no triumph, no calculation, just dread. Murderers often tried to hide their tracks. Veronica looked like someone barely holding herself together. Back home, the landline rang. Agatha lifted the receiver. "Yes?" "Mrs. Raisin, Giles Corbett." His voice dripped irritation. "Just so you know, the police were sniffing around. I've given them my alibi. I was in London, unfortunately, surrounded by accountants. Hardly the glamorous murder you're imagining." Agatha rolled her eyes. "I wasn't imagining anything glamorous, Mr. Corbett. Murder is tedious, like paperwork, but with corpses." He snorted. "Well, whatever you're implying, I'm cleared. The police can confirm it." "Lovely for you," Agatha said, and hung up. With Giles removed from the board, the pattern sharpened. Veronica's terror didn't look like guilt. It looked like someone who feared being next, or being exposed, or both. Shame could warp motives, yes, but could shame alone kill? Agatha set her handbag down and sat heavily on the sofa. The house was quiet, except for the faint thump of Hodge landing gracefully nearby. He regarded her with calm amber eyes. "Well," she asked him, "think Veronica did it?" Hodge blinked, then padded to the hidden biscuit tin Agatha had tucked under her arm on leaving Veronica's, sniffing it with regal disdain. He nudged it aside and sat, wrapping his tail around himself like a conclusion. Agatha sighed. "Yes, I know. Nothing is ever that simple." Her gaze drifted to the kettle on the counter. She rose, filled it, and listened as it began its soft, familiar hiss, steady, domestic, reassuring. The sound grounded her, chasing off the last of Veronica's oppressive sitting room. She took a breath. The case was shifting. Shame, secrecy, health risks, doctored sweeteners, private binges, dangerous tablets, and someone who had slipped into the mill kitchen at precisely the right time. It was intimate, personal. Less corporate conspiracy, more human fear twisting into something ugly. Hodge hopped onto her lap, warm and heavy. Agatha stroked him absently, eyes narrowing with renewed determination. "Fine," she murmured. "If Veronica's not the murderer, then the real one is hiding behind an even better mask. But they won't stay hidden." The kettle gave a quiet, contented sigh, the perfect, almost approving sound to end a long, unsettling morning. Agatha began the evening with a performance of brisk competence. "Don't hover there, Charles," she snapped, nudging him away from the cake stand. "You're meant to be moral support, not quality control." Charles muttered that moral support went down better with a slice of Victoria sponge, but he withdrew anyway. Her cottage glowed with determined coziness, fire-lit, side lamps glowing, and every surface bearing a dish, sample tin or sugar bowl. The whole room felt like an eccentric tea laboratory. Hodge, unimpressed, patrolled the skirting boards as if checking for contraband. Agatha surveyed the scene. Everything was ready. The plan required exact timing, confident bluff, and a willingness to irritate nearly everyone present. Her strongest skill. Doris had helped with plates and napkins, but had wisely departed before the guests arrived. The first knock came just as Agatha straightened a tray. Oliver the baker entered, flour still clinging to his jumper. "Evening, Mrs. Raisin. Smells lovely." "It isn't meant to smell lovely. It's meant to smell forensic," Agatha retorted, ushering him in. Oliver blinked. "Right, of course." Next came Tamsin, clutching a notebook. Her anxious expression made Agatha feel a flicker of guilt, quickly squashed. Behind her arrived Giles Corbett, crisp suit and irritated demeanour, followed by Veronica Pike, who greeted the room as though entering a parish fete she disapproved of. Bill arrived with weary resignation, Charles with idle amusement. Bill lifted a warning finger. "Agatha, I'm only here because you promised this wouldn't turn into another public spectacle." "It won't," Agatha said crisply. "Just clarification." Agatha clapped her hands sharply. "Thank you all for coming. I've invited you because we must finalize the sweet fare recipes, and because—" She paused. "Each of you knew Serena's methods better than anyone thinks." Veronica stiffened immediately. "Agatha, this is scarcely the moment." "It's precisely the moment," Agatha said. "Sit, all of you." They sat. Hodge leapt onto a chair like an adjudicator. Agatha began lightly. "Let's start with something harmless. How did Serena like her tea?" Oliver shrugged. "No idea. She made it herself. Didn't want customers seeing her additives." Agatha noted that. "Tamsin?" Tamsin pushed her glasses up. "Black, with her approved sweetener. Only from the tin by the kettle. She said it kept her blood sugar steady." "And no one else touched that tin?" Tamsin shook her head vigorously. "Never. She'd bite your head off." Agatha turned to Giles, who looked as if the question bored him. "I barely entered the kitchen. I dealt with finances, not sweeteners." He glanced around. "This is absurd." "Absurdity," Agatha said sweetly, "is my preferred investigative method." Charles coughed to hide a laugh. "Now then," Agatha continued, "we'll reenact Serena's tea ritual. Each of you, one by one, prepare it as you saw her do." Oliver looked horrified, but complied. He approached the kettle, sniffed the tins nervously, and backed away. "Never touch that one," he said, pointing at the personal tin. "Too scared I'd ruin her fancy mixtures." A defensiveness that felt genuine. Tamsin's turn came. She moved with the practiced precision of a bullied assistant, placing the mug, opening the tin, and tapping the spoon exactly twice. "She watched me constantly," Tamsin whispered. "Said I was heavy-handed." "A tyrant to the end," Agatha murmured. Giles refused outright. "I'm not performing tea ceremonies." Agatha didn't push. His very refusal made her point. Bill sighed as she gestured him forward. "This isn't procedure, Agatha," he muttered, but he demonstrated anyway, awkward but sincere. Finally, Agatha turned to Veronica. "Your turn." Veronica rose with the air of a woman consenting to charity. She crossed to the kettle with unstudied confidence, reached straight past the decorative tins, and grasped Serena's personal sweetener tin with casual familiarity. Without hesitation, she scooped a precise measure into the mug. A silence settled. It was the kind of silence that might follow a hymn sung slightly off-key, uncomfortable, revealing, impossible to ignore. Agatha stepped closer. "Interesting, Veronica. You moved as though you've done this many times." Veronica froze. "Serena showed me once, for health reasons." "Once?" Agatha repeated gently. "You opened that tin like a woman who checks it daily." Veronica flushed. "Your insinuation is distasteful." "Possibly," Agatha said, "but not as distasteful as murder." Gasps erupted. Giles swore under his breath. Oliver whispered, "Blimey!" Tamsin burst instantly into tears. Veronica's composure faltered. "How dare you?" Agatha pressed on. "Serena kept her approved sweetener separate for medical reasons. Only 2 people besides Serena knew the exact type she needed. You, from your sugar sinner's work, and Tamsin from ordering stock." She stepped closer still. "Tamsin didn't have the opportunity during the critical window. Giles never touched the kitchen. Oliver was too frightened to go near the tin, but you," Agatha pointed at the tin in Veronica's hand, "you knew exactly where it stood, exactly how much she used, and exactly which substitutes would harm her." Veronica's lips moved soundlessly. Bill cleared his throat. "Agatha, tread carefully. This is still a police matter." "Yes, Bill, but you already know toxicology identified a cocktail of strong sweeteners mixed with medication. Medication," she added softly, "kept in your house and easily accessible to you. And you were alone with that tin the morning Serena died. Oliver saw you." "Checking on charity cakes," Oliver piped up timidly. Veronica turned on him. "You misunderstood." Agatha shook her head. "Did he? You had every motive. Serena threatened to expose your private binges. She mocked your group. She intended to parade you as a cautionary tale, public humiliation for a vicar's wife." Veronica sagged against the counter. Her face crumpled like thin pastry. "I only meant to make her ill," she whispered. "A brief, shocking illness. Enough to stop the Slimmix nonsense, enough to make her listen." The room held its breath. "I used a little of the harsh blend," Veronica continued, tears spilling. "Just enough, I thought, to make her faint. And I panicked. I truly panicked. She wouldn't stop talking, wouldn't stop boasting. I thought she deserved to be shaken." "You swapped the contents of the tin," Agatha said quietly, "knowing she'd make her own tea during your meeting." Veronica nodded miserably. "I never imagined it would kill her. I swear by everything holy I didn't." Giles muttered, "Holy's a stretch." Bill raised a hand. "Mrs. Pike, you need to come with me. This must be handled formally." Veronica wept into her handkerchief. "I didn't mean to destroy everything." "But you did," Agatha said, gentler now, "out of fear. Serena's cruelty met your shame, and neither survived the collision." For a long moment, no one spoke. The fire crackled softly. Hodge hopped onto Agatha's lap as though declaring the performance over. Bill led Veronica outside, her sobs drifting into the cool evening. Giles excused himself curtly. Oliver stood awkwardly before slipping out. Tamsin hugged Agatha impulsively before hurrying away. Only Charles remained, hands in pockets, expression thoughtful. "You know," he said, "for someone who claims not to understand human frailty, you handled that rather delicately." "Don't be ridiculous," Agatha snapped, though a faint warmth crept up her neck. "I staged a trap and she fell into it." "And you looked almost kind doing it," Charles added with a grin. "Nonsense, put the kettle on." Charles rolled his eyes but complied. The kettle let out its familiar sigh. Agatha stroked Hodge absently, feeling oddly heavy. She had solved the case, yes, and neatly, but Veronica's frightened misery lingered. Murder was rarely tidy. Reputation, shame, and the terror of exposure, those were the real culprits. Still, she thought, watching Hodge stretch luxuriously, justice had been served, and in Carsley, that counted for something. The kettle clicked off. Tea was poured, and Agatha, despite everything, allowed herself one small, wry smile. After all, she had a sweet fare to run. Carsley resumed its usual rhythm with the stubborn resilience of a village that had lived through harvest failures, church roof scandals, and at least 2 WI coups, all of which were apparently more shocking than murder. Within 3 days of Veronica Pike's arrest, the gossip had softened from shrill fascination to wistful tutting. People spoke of her poor nerves and the terrible pressure of parish responsibilities, as though the woman had merely misplaced a hymnal rather than tampered fatally with another woman's sweetener. It was not willful hypocrisy. Carsley had an instinctive desire to protect its own. Murder, even by a vicar's wife, felt like an aberration the village refused to claim. At the Red Lion, bar chatter lowered itself politely whenever Veronica's name appeared in conversation. "Such a shame," murmured Mrs. Mason. "A breakdown, surely." "Had to be," agreed her companion. "You look at her church flowers, always immaculate. That level of order doesn't come from a stable mind." At the grocer's, Doris Simpson found herself refereeing 2 women who insisted on arguing whether Veronica had always been odd or had simply become odd due to proximity to Serena Dalrymple. Doris wisely redirected the conversation to the new shipment of biscuits. Few villages in England were more adept at pivoting from tragedy to tea. Bill Wong appeared in the local paper 2 days later under the triumphant headline, "Mercester Police Crack Sweetener Case." The article generously credited his methodical handling of a complex investigation and referred only vaguely to assistance from a village resident. Agatha snorted when she read it. "Assistance? I solved the thing," she told Hodge, who lay sprawled on the sofa with the expression of a cat who had not been impressed by police work since the Roman occupation. But there was a glimmer of satisfaction beneath her irritation. Bill deserved recognition. He would never boast, poor man, and Agatha found herself rather moved by the earnestness with which he accepted the praise. Meanwhile, Roy Silver could not resist cashing in. He sold Serena. "Just try not to antagonize every suspect next time." "If suspects behaved rationally, I wouldn't have to." Bill chuckled, then set the evidence bag gently on her coffee table. "Case is officially closed. Paperwork nearly finished. Veronica will undergo a psychological evaluation. They're considering leniency on account of emotional distress." "She's lucky," Agatha muttered. "If she'd killed someone less theatrical than Serena, she'd have caused far less chaos." Bill shook his head fondly. "Do try to stay out of trouble for at least a week." "I make no promises." After he left, Agatha settled back into her chair. Hodge stretched luxuriously, then yawned with such unflattering breadth that she momentarily forgot to feel dramatic. She reached for her cake and ate another generous bite. The sweetness comforted her in a way that victory alone never quite managed. It had been, she thought, a particularly bitter little mystery. Bitter with fear, ambition, and the peculiar shame that clings to self-improvement fads. Yet it had ended with something like justice. Messy, human, imperfect justice. She looked at the sugar bowl on her side table. Ordinary, honest sugar. Nothing exclusive, nothing deceitful. It glimmered faintly in the lamplight like tiny crystals of domestic reassurance. In the background, the kettle sighed, cooling slowly. Outside, Carsley's Lane settled into their habitual hush, punctuated by the distant thrum of a passing car or the bark of an optimistic dog. Agatha felt a small tug of loneliness threaded through her satisfaction, the way she often did after a case. The thrill had subsided, leaving a space that ordinary life rushed to fill, not always gracefully. She wondered what would come next. Something foolish, no doubt. A new WI feud, a neighbour's scandal, perhaps a handsome stranger with questionable motives. Trouble tended to find her as naturally as Hodge found warm laundry. Hodge nudged her hand, perhaps sensing her drift into introspection. She scratched behind his ear, grateful for the grounding presence of a creature who neither judged nor lectured and had no interest in sweeteners of any sort, unless they had once rolled across the floor. "You know," she murmured to him, "we almost had peace this month." Hodge flicked his tail with feline skepticism. "Don't worry," Agatha added. "There'll be another case soon. There always is." She contemplated the empty plate on the table. "And if there isn't," she said, "I can always start a feud with Mrs. Mason about scones." The fire crackled its approval. Somewhere in the village a door closed, a dog barked again, and life resumed its usual contented absurdity. Agatha Raisin, private detective of accidental renown, slouched deeper into her armchair and let the quiet enfold her. Another case solved, another scandal absorbed into Carselli's folklore, another evening ending with cake. She lifted her cup in a small, defiant toast to no one in particular and whispered, "To sweetness, proper sweetness." Hodge stretched, curled into a warm spiral on her lap, and purred as if agreeing that whatever chaos lay ahead, tonight's quiet triumph was enough.